My name is Andrew D. Bashago. I'm an attorney from Washington State in active practice. I have a current law practice throughout the state of Washington. On the public service side of my career, I've been waging a truth campaign nationally and now globally to establish two very important truths that have been kept back from the American people for decades. The first is that many different forms of time travel were developed by the U.S. defense technical community so that they were fully operational by 1970. Initially in 1967-68, when I first teleported from New Jersey to Santa Fe, New Mexico with my late father, who was a special projects engineer with the Ralph M. Parsons Company of Pasadena, California, with operational linkages to the Central Intelligence Agency. But officially, beginning in the fall of 1969, as a third grader, I was one of the 140 American school children who were brought into DARPA's Project Pegasus, which had a number of functions, but primarily it was a classified research and development program to develop time travel. But really, much of the time travel technology had already been derived, and what was being cobbled together within the secret reaches of the U.S. intelligence community was an intelligence program that would map past and future events to inform the government function. So, on Monday, the first tier of information I'm going to share with you is really the first narrative thread of my story and the first function of my truth campaign, which is to describe what Project Pegasus was. I'm going to be sharing the 8 forms of time travel that I know the U.S. government has been working with for 40 years, from the most rudimentary form of time travel, which is psychic time travel, that's called remote viewing, all the way to the jump rooms that have been operational since at least, or no later than 1980, by which when I was trained in the summer of 1980, we were told already almost 100,000 Americans had been jump room, that is, teleported to the planet Mars. So during that first exercise on Monday, I'm going to describe what the technologies were, and I'm going to provide some anecdotes just to give you some color as to what Project Pegasus was doing and my experiences in the project, so that you can see really how far advanced time travel was when I was a young lad. I'm 49. I mean, I served in Project Pegasus from the fall of 1969 to the summer of 1972, with 3 extra summers worked into that as a result of teleporting to Santa Fe, spending time in New Mexico, and then teleporting back to New Jersey at the end of the summer, arriving on the afternoon of the day we had left in the beginning of the summer. So I'm really going to be describing 4 years of experience as one of the children caught up in one of these post-war special access projects. My information is true. I think that I've established that now to a factual certainty, because my approach as a trial lawyer has been to use the inundative method of presentation, which is where you present so many facts that the reasonable juror can conclude that you can't be making it up. So that first thread begins when my father takes me up to the old Curtiss Wright Aeronautical Company facility and explains that we're going to be jumping through this device and arriving on a hillside somewhere else in the country. We go through a vortal tunnel in time-space. We pop into view, actually some distance apart from each other, on the Santa Fe State Capitol grounds. Ultimately, we meet up about an hour later, and he drives me with a state car there that he gets in one of the state office buildings in Santa Fe, into a meeting with Dr. Harold M. Agnew, who was then the director of the W Division, which is the weapons division at the Los Alamos National Labs, which since the Manhattan Project during World War II has been the primary weapons maker for the U.S. Defense Department. So in describing my time travel experiences, we start with the premise that time travel not only exists, but it's been captured by the bomb makers. In other words, it's been sequestered since World War II in the Defense Department when you may recall from the conventional biographies of Nikola Tesla that there were two teams racing to his apartment in Manhattan when he died on January 9th of 1943. Two FBI agents and two agents of the War Department. Well, the War Department officers got there first. They seized Nikola's lab manuals containing his last 15 years of advanced work. Lab manuals that literally contained the infrastructure of the 21st century to include physical teleportation via Vortal tunnel in the fabric of time-space, not the quantum teleportation you're reading about all the time in the science news, which is primarily disinformational. But Tesla's papers remain to this day at the Los Alamos National Labs. So my truth campaign around time travel is actually a work in peace studies to the extent that I believe that teleportation needs to be liberated from where it is now held in the defense community so that we can utilize it to revolutionize transportation around the world and use the economic development that's going to come from that to help prevent wars, at least the resource wars that we've seen under the several last administrations. So in that thread, that first tier of information on Monday, I'll take you through the different technologies, share some of my experiences. I'll then describe what the US government knew about the future by 1970, because we weren't just training to be the next generation of American chrononauts. I was my father's son, and as one of the project principals, that is my father being one of the project principals, just hanging out with him in New Mexico caused me to be at many meetings and at many lunches and dinners with some of the other principals. Individuals like Dr. Agnew, Dr. Ivan J. Browning, when he was the director of the Directorate of Science and Technology for the CIA, some of the Manhattan Project scientists who were working on Project Pegasus, including Dr. Edward Teller, the very individual that Michio Kaku refused to work on bomb development with and was cut out of all the time travel, kept away from all the time travel files as a result. So Teller was one of the Manhattan Project scientists attached to Project Pegasus. Dr. Agnew was. And even during some of those lunches and dinners, I had the opportunity to meet some of the future presidents and vice presidents of the United States, because one of the ways that time travel has been used is to gather information about certain political persons of interest, whether they be our mainstream political leadership or alternative political leaders, like the individual sitting to my left, Alfred Weber, and Laura Magdalene Eisenhower. So I'm going to be describing both the large public events and also the things I learned about my own future and people who I am now allied with in the truth movement, whose names came up during these project meetings among project insiders. The first time I heard the name Alfred Weber was at a lunch in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1971. During the first summer of 1971, which was my second summer in New Mexico, we spent the first half of the summer experimenting with chronovision. Chronovision is a chronovisor, also called a looking glass technology. It's an electro-optical device that tunes in a past or future event. It basically propagates a hologram, which is a dense field of light that's so dense that it has a lensing effect whereby non-local events, what we would call past or future events, are lensed into the laboratory. So for the first half of that summer of '71, after my father and I teleported there from Curtiss-Wright again, my activities were focused on visiting the Lincoln assassination site so that I could then describe what I saw. The specific mission I was given was to walk up the staircase and get behind the Lincoln's balcony seating there and see who shot President Lincoln. The reason that they had me doing that was to see whether I would experience the same thing every time. As it turned out, every time I was sent via chronovision to that location, something changed a little bit. And so, as other children were experiencing the chronovision probes, in the middle of the summer of '71, I was at a meeting at the Sandia Auditorium. There were about 30 project personnel there from Project Pegasus, including my dad. And it was announced that they were going to be shutting down time travel to the past via chronovision, because every time they sent the same child to another child to the same event, such as the Lincoln assassination site, it changed a little bit. And so in light of the inherent dangers involved to the children, they were going to be shutting down that component of Project Pegasus. So the latter half of that second hidden summer of 71 was focused on my dad taking me up to a viewing room at the Sandia campus. This is the Sandia National Labs again, where images of my own subjective future were being brought up, because what had been determined was that I was going to become the chief whistleblower regarding Project Pegasus, that I was going to have a public career in the future, and that I was basically going to spill the beans about everything they were working on. And so they had some ambivalent feelings about my involvement. I had jumped through all the hoops to even time travel to the distant future to recover data scrolls of future events that project historians were drafting in the year 2045 and bringing them back. My father was essentially the point man between Parsons and CIA. Among the 140 school children who were the gifted and talented kids that had been brought into the project in fall '69, I had not only been groomed for, essentially through thousands of hours of training, but I was actively time traveling for them. And in their own efforts to retrieve information from the future, like, hey, what are some of the futures of some of the kids we've involved in this project? They began to retrieve books that I would either write or edit in the future. The first, of course, was the book that I'm currently authoring, and that's long delayed. I apologize for not yet delivering it, but I've been practicing law and doing more radio than my voice has really been able to sustain. But my one book that I know they had was my memoir of my project experiences, entitled Once Upon a Time in the Time Stream, My Adventures in Project Pegasus at the Dawn of the Time-Space Age. So that remains a work in progress. I've got about 225 vignettes, so the essential story of what I experienced in Project Pegasus has been reduced to paper and will not be lost, even if I lose my life during my truth campaign. It has been secreted around the world. So we have that on a set of external drives that aren't going to be going. Okay. So among the other books they had was the Fatima Trilogy, where I edited the Fatima books of Joaquin Fernandez and Fina Darmada, and really the classic seminal treatise in exopolitics, which is a work that Alfred Lambermont Weber wrote initially, I think, in 1999-2000 time frame as a treatise that Alfred posted on the internet at his website, exopolitics.com. And then after Alfred and I became friends during the 1999-2000 period, that gradually evolved into a professional or creative collaboration where I edited and did some supplementation of his work, Exopolitics, in 2005. Well, back in 1971, when they were investigating, why does Andy become the principal whistleblower? Why, he refuses our attempt to get him to go to the Naval Academy. He refuses our approach when he was a student at Cambridge in the mid-90s to join the CIA. How is it that into the 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 time frame, he makes it his business to tell everybody in the world about the fact that we achieved time travel? One of the books they retrieved was Alfred's 2005 edition of Exopolitics. I was having lunch at a Mexican restaurant in Albuquerque with my father and his longtime friend and sometimes mistress, Mary Constance Chavez. Connie Chavez was almost a folkloric figure in Old Town Albuquerque history. She was the cashier and the waitress at the La Hacienda and La Placida restaurants, which are two of the most, then they were the two primary Mexican restaurants in all of New Mexico. My dad met Connie in the 1953-54 time frame when he was at White Sands flight testing the ramjet engine for Curtiss Wright, which was one of the projects he worked on in the secret defense realm as an aerospace engineer. In fact, he was sent to Curtiss Wright on orders from the U.S. Defense Department in October of 1952 in response to the July 1950 overflight of our nation's capital by 9 UFOs clocked at 7,000 miles per hour at the Langley Air Force Base. So long before my birth in 1961, my father had been working on some of the most sensitive aerospace projects that our nation launched during the 50s and 60s. And then that work progressed into his involvement on the time travel project. Because if we were going to protect the United States from the grays and the reds, that is to say, the extraterrestrials and the Soviet communists, which was the thinking at that time. We were going to have to achieve full spectrum dominance of the time-space continuum. At least that was the goal of Project Pegasus. So there in 71, they were investigating me. I don't know at what depth. I do know that my father, I mean really for the rest of the summer, for weeks we were driving up to Sandia and they were pulling up images of my future. So in that context, my dad left the table there at the Mexican restaurant and returned with a black security pouch. This would be a black leather pouch about the size of, oh, I don't know, maybe 2 phone books. And he pulled out Alfred's book and he handed it to Connie because as his old friend, Connie was sort of one of those non-project members who was being brought into secrets that the Defense Department and the intelligence community were developing, my father was privy to. So, as some of you may know, people who are in that line of work, they always have a confessor. They always have, because they're bound to be assassinated if they talk about their work, they always have somebody, one person, a brother-in-law, an old girlfriend, somebody, their barber, who they have to spill the beans to. So my dad's life, that was Mary Constance Chavez, born 1928, died 1981, Albuquerque, New Mexico. So Connie looked at the book and said, and I'll never forget it because I would meet Alfred 29 years later. She said, "Who is Alfred Lambermont Weber?" And he said, forgive me, Alfred, my dad was a Nixon Republican who voted for Truman and Kennedy, but that was it. He said, "Oh, just some peacenik that Andy gets wrapped up with." This, of course, is 1971, summer of 71. Not that long after Kent State and My Lai has just been reported or will soon be reported. So my dad was a Nixon Republican, but a really nice guy. He was from rural Pennsylvania and a very principled American. And she said, "Oh, really?" And then she started looking through the book, and my dad was sort of disparaging. He said, "But look, he's like 39 when, or no, he's 34 when this comes out, or no, 44 when this comes out. And look, he didn't write it, he only edited it." And Connie said, "But Ray, it's an impressive work. It's obviously written by one of the primary intellectuals of his time. Because look at this credit on the front of the book. It's from an astronaut, which was astronaut Brian O'Leary, who wrote one of the forwards to Alfred's distinguished, I believe, literally, the common sense, Thomas Paine's common sense of the time-space age, which is exopolitics. A book that founded a discipline, which doesn't occur that often. And so she says, if an astronaut wrote one of the endorsements, it must be an important work, and I think it is. She then paged through to the front pages of the work, and she said, "Who is President Jimmy Carter?" Because Alfred included a quote from President Carter that I believe relates to the Voyager mission to Mars, the remote mission to Mars in 1976, right before we began placing people there via jump room in 1977. And my dad said, "Oh, I don't know whether he said the governor of Georgia or the lieutenant governor of Georgia, but he identified the office that James Earl Carter had then reached." So part of my story, and one that I know defies common sense, is that in my experiences in Project Pegasus, the future was interpolated into the present, and I'm still writing about those facts from the past, even though they contain harbingers of the present. So for example, one time we were coming back from a party in Lamy, New Mexico with Connie, and Dad was driving. Connie was paging through my memoir, Once Upon a Time in the Time Stream. And she says, "Ray, your son is a vacuum cleaner. He's a human vacuum cleaner." And my dad said, "Why is that, Connie?" And he said, "Because sometimes I'll read something in the book and we just do it." And he said, "What do you mean? Give me an example." And then she opened up the book and she said, "When driving back from the party in Lamy, Connie said to my father, 'Ray, your son is a human vacuum cleaner.'" and then she slammed the book because she was reading about herself doing something in the present in a book that wouldn't appear until 2011, 2012 sometime, that had been time traveled back to the time that the event occurred, which was 1970-71 by Project Pegasus. So the purpose of that is to show that within the secret realms of the U.S. executive branch, the presidency, the intelligence community, and the military, individuals have been dealing with forward intelligence, with future information, that is to say, information about future events. And hopefully you'll see, I'm not going to just be providing information about 9/11, but you'll start to see the decisional framework that people are operating under now that we are on a non-local basis. There are certain quantum paradoxes that need to be avoided. And there have been times when our executive leadership has inadvertently revealed that this is in fact governing the government function. Now, in this context, when I was a child in the project, I was in the project from roughly, at least officially, from age 7 to 11. And then my activities in Project Pegasus ended at the end of 1972. So in that first lecture on Monday, I'm just going to be giving you a summing up of what happened during my first set of exposures to secret activity inside the U.S. government. Because in fact, after that, I had a fairly normal junior high and high school and first year of college where I wasn't doing anything for the government. In that context on the project as a child in 1972, they also discussed another person of interest, who's the lovely lady sitting next to me, Laura Magdalene Eisenhower. Brilliant Laura, who's going to have a huge impact on our time and in our generation. And the amazing thing is that her name was provided to me, not intentionally. Again, many of the things I was learning about the future were just shop talk going on in my presence. And Laura bears a very distinguished heritage in the sense that she's a descendant of President Dwight David Eisenhower. So clearly as a data point in my future, that is to say a future ally, again, it was one of the colorful things that was being discussed. In other words, they weren't discussing Laura specifically, although what they said about our partnership was very telling. But they said, so is this the granddaughter of President Eisenhower? And my dad said, no, the great-granddaughter. So another amazing fact about this trio that has come together in the 2010s here is that I first learned of Laura's name and her persona and her impact on history a year before she was born, which I think is special. And so Laura's name came up, and all three of us were identified in these discussions as figures in the truth movement. There's some more political dimensions to it, which I'll explain during the lectures, but essentially they were identifying who my allies were because they were Nixon Republicans working on time travel for the CIA. They weren't that mindful necessarily of what my future held, but they did want to find out, well, why does he become the principal whistleblower? So they were mapping my future. That's what Project Pegasus was doing. It was mapping the past and future because in a nuclear age where the thrust is survival and peace, supposedly, even if you're building an arsenal of, what, 60,000 nuclear warheads, their thinking still was if they knew more about past and future events, they could engage in better contingency planning in the present to prevent nuclear war. So they were discerning things about my future, and that included the profound friendship and allyship of Alfred and Laura and I in the present. So here we are. We're now living out what they predicted accurately. The amazing thing about their predictive ability when they were working with certain technologies, like sending somebody to the future via teleportation and having them bring artifacts back, rather than the kind of hit and miss sampling of the quantum hologram that you get with chronovision, is some of the people who become my allies, it just, like, for example, Dixie Karras, my friend in Vancouver, Washington, went on my second fact-finding trip to New Mexico in 2004. Well, I met Dixie standing in line at an Office Max in Vancouver, Washington. I dropped a manuscript, and I said something to her like, oh, I better not get my papers dirty because stationery is sacred. She's just a nice lady standing there. Dixie ended up becoming quantum embedded in the whole story in the way that Alfred and Laura are, who are already public figures. But Dixie's just a lady that was a friend of mine from Vancouver, Washington. She ended up going on the fact-finding trip in 2004, where I found every last project location in New Mexico, and she pointed out right in front of her car, her rental car, the small toy from a Captain Crunch box that I had dropped in Lamey, New Mexico, in a mud puddle out the school bus window. When we teleported to Santa Fe one day, we were greeted by Jack Pruitt, who was a team leader on Project Pegasus, who would later become the research director of Project Montauk. We were then taken in the building, and roll was taken. We had to give our first and last name and our date of birth to a very young Governor Bill Richardson, who just had graduated from college. Governor Richardson's first work in government was working secretly on Project Pegasus. I have had a discussion with him about our project experiences. He affirmed them but refused to come forward publicly, but I still hope to have him come forward. We were then being bused to an old school site in Lamy where we would be medically examined and tested with about 2.5 hours of standardized testing. And hoping and not believing that we were doing what we were doing in the project. I mean, it was a mind bender for me as a little kid. I was just a bright kid from Morris Plains, New Jersey. I had a high IQ and was very psychically active, but I wasn't a prodigy in the sense of, savants who can solve high-end math problems and, draw the inside of a cathedral and that kind of performance. I was just a bright kid from New Jersey. They wanted to see the mental and physical effects of teleportation on the ordinary, healthy, bright kid, like the kind of kid who might be the child of a president or a vice president who might be teleported. So we would be taken up to Lamy after arriving there via teleportation and do about 2.5 hours, after get a cursory medical exam, doing about 2.5 hours of standardized testing. So I thought, I better leave some kind of memento mori here in New Mexico, or I'm never going to be able to prove that I was ever here, much less even convince my 4 older brothers and sisters that I was time traveling. Because every time I brought it up in New Jersey, to them, to my mother, to my friends, nobody believed it. In fact, we were told during our training there would be 3 consequences if we told about what we were doing in the secret project. Either people would believe we were lying, or they would believe we were crazy, or they would be envious because they weren't involved. And those 3 things, in fact, have now happened in the public domain now that I've taken an attempt to get others to understand that what happened to me really happened to me. I've now taken it, into a truth campaign, a disclosure effort within the truth movement. But I think I am winning my truth campaign because you may recall that I've done a couple of broadcasts with George Norrie on Coast to Coast AM, and after the second one last November, 65% of the listening audience stated that they believed that what I was describing had been achieved by the U.S. government secretly in the late 60s and early 70s. So I think I'm prevailing. And I think I'm prevailing in my truth campaign because people know I'm telling the truth. I'm not embellishing what happened, and yet I'm providing facts that simply are too complicated and also too internally consistent to have been made up. And I'm also, as we'll find during my second talk later in the week, I have corroboration now of somebody who not only has time traveled for the U.S. government, but he was in my training, and he was one of the individuals I was trained with and went to Mars with. So my truth campaign now, after almost a decade, has resulted in corroborating witnesses from the project who have approached me. Alfred and Laura may know that when we were speaking in Philadelphia in April, somebody from New Jersey approached me who I met in one of the air bases in New Jersey when I was a child on the project. So, as I was saying, they were quite accurate in identifying specific people even. I mean, I met Dixie in line there at Office Max. She found the little toy that I dropped from the school bus window, splashed in a mud puddle. I remember saying 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and then dropping it. Well, we found it in that mud puddle, although the mud puddle had now dried, and that little toy had been baking in the New Mexico sunshine for 34 years. I didn't find it when I went back when I was old, like I intended to go back when I was 18 or 21, at the age it could be to serve in Vietnam or drink beer or vote. I went back and we found it on my 43rd birthday, as well as all of the project locations. So I really feel that the great creative spirit who created everything wants our human civilization to not only survive, but thrive. And I believe I've been getting divine help at every step of the way, because when I started 10 years ago, I couldn't even get my siblings to believe me, and one of my brothers, who's a physician, made a psychiatric referral to Kaiser. You're not getting your inheritance until you get your head examined, which I did, and I passed with flying colors. But now, I think many people are understanding that I'm talking about the truth. Other people are corroborating aspects of what happened. And I think we're going to have full disclosure of time travel soon. And if this president doesn't do it, I'm going to run for president myself in 2016 and do it. Because we're going to need teleportation to deal with the crisis of environment and development that's already on us. We're going to be going from 7 billion human beings to 9 by 2045. And we're going to have to move those people around the planet way that doesn't involve them strapping 4,000 pounds of metal around their waist with their seatbelt in their car. We're going to have to implement a way to travel with very little input of material, time, and energy. And I believe that that is Tesla teleportation because it was achieved 40 years ago. And we don't have to reinvent it and spend billions of dollars developing. All we have to do is have the government reveal it. We have to have the government disclose it so it can be deployed and help people achieve real-time movement between point A and point B. As Ivan Browning said in 1971, we have to find a way, of course, this was disinformational, but he said, we have to find a way to stop moving somebody from point A to point B and find a way to have them stop being at point A and start being at point B. Well, that form of transit, Tesla teleportation, was operational by 1967-68, and I will spend the rest of my life, if I have to, getting it disclosed, because when we introduce it, it'll transform life on our planet. So, to give you a sense of what these time travel technologies achieved in terms of intelligence gathering, I will reveal in the second part of my discussion on Monday what I know the U.S. government knew in 1970 about our times. You'll see that, as I said, in some sense, our executive leaders are trapped. And the reason I don't think that they've moved against me is because they need individuals like myself to step forward to get them off the hook. Because when they enter office, they are literally working in a decisional environment in which time travel about the future is informing what they do every day. And so this is going to help, I view it sort of as a corrective function within government itself. Did I sign a security oath, a loyalty agreement, not to talk and tell of these secrets? Yes, but I was only 7 going on 8 in fall of 1969. And as an attorney, I know that children lack the capacity to contract. And so I have been happily violating my security agreement, and I hope that Donald Rumsfeld doesn't do anything crazy in his latter years and move against me. But certainly nobody from the project or in government has. Perhaps because they believe that nobody will believe me, but what do you know? I at least have been getting 65% of the Coast audience, and I think that's a pretty intelligent group of people. I think that embraces certainly the cultural creative niche in our society. So in the second half, I'll talk about, well, what do they know? I mean, are you telling me that they literally knew about major events of our time? Well, yes, they did. They spoke about them in my presence. So I'll just list what those are, and I'll describe what they said about what they knew of those major future events, and some personal events as well. And then finally, in the last part of my talk on Monday, I will describe the 2 principal forms of time travel that have been developed and what I think their positive and negative capabilities are. And then I'll advance my political discussion of how I think they should be implemented in our time. That would be Tesla teleportation, which is, again, this capacity to open up a vortal tunnel in the fabric of time-space that the teleportees jump through in a quantum leap uninjured, a technology that you can use to go from, hopefully one day, from Grand Central Teleport in New York City to Union Teleport in Los Angeles, literally in seconds, which is the time it was taking us to jump from Woodridge, New Jersey to Santa Fe, New Mexico when I was a child on the project 40 years ago. So there has been a Tesla cover-up, not just the conventional Nikola Tesla of the electrical engineering textbooks, not the alternative conventional Tesla cover-up of the free energy claims, which are true, but which are a limited part of the picture. The Tesla cover-up is focused on the time travel devices that he left in his lab manuals that, as I said, are still at Los Alamos. So Tesla teleportation was the major thing that they were having us do to kind of practice time traveling. Sometimes we were jumping in real time, sometimes there was an adjustment forward or backward in time. So I'm pushing for the declassification of Tesla teleportation, not the quantum teleportation that is always publicized. The second major time travel technology that I think needs to be released, that is disclosed and implemented on a limited public access basis, is the chronovision technology of Ernetti, Gemelli, and Fermi. These holograms that you can propagate of past and future events. I believe that if we were to declassify and deploy chronovision, it would work a revolution in science and education and culture in our planet. imagine if American and school children around the world could not only read about the signing of the U.S. Constitution, but see it as it happened. Well, I saw it as it happened when I was taken to a national security watch post in Flemington, New Jersey in the fall of 1970. If I could have seen the U.S. Constitution being signed on September 17th of 1787, 40 years ago, why shouldn't every other school child on planet Earth be able to see these auspicious human events of all kind? But certainly it would be a great thing for them to see Benjamin Franklin and George Washington participating in such an historical event. Would we like to see George Washington using the privy or Benjamin Franklin making love to his wife? No. So chronovision brings with it threats to privacy that we have to guard for. So I'm pushing for limited public access of chronovision, or otherwise there's not going to be any privacy anymore. People are going to be hacking into other people's past and futures and then downloading the video to YouTube. And I don't think that's the world that any of us wants to be living in, where your past, present, future sex life becomes the pornography of the future, and for that matter of the present. So because of these threats to privacy, some of these time travel technologies still need to be sequestered within the regulatory function, the administrative function of government, but we should still benefit from the opportunities they present while we're protected from the constraints, the threats that they bring. So during the third half of my presentation on Monday, I present what I think should be done with the technologies. Then, if I might briefly describe, on Thursday, I'm going to be presenting not just 30 images from Mars. I've been actively developing images, that is, finding images of human and animal life forms on Mars since I began in earnest studying NASA's images in 2008. But in fact, my work as a Mars anomalist is quantum entangled in my time travel experiences, because I'll start that lecture describing how when I was a child attached to Project Pegasus, among other things related to Mars, in 1971, I was permitted to read my 2008 paper, The Discovery of Life on Mars, which emerged publicly through the good graces of the Benjamin Franklin of the 21st century sitting to my left. Alfred published my paper, The Discovery of Life on Mars, at exopolitics.com, and has faithfully stood by me during our entire rollout of life on Mars, to include the fact that Mars is not only inhabited with human and animal life forms that presently exist on Earth, or once existed on Earth, or that are hybrids of living and extinct Earth species, or that have never survived on Earth, but Mars is indeed the location of a human presence, a colony that the wonderful woman on my right was invited to join in 2006. So I'll describe how my Mars work was quantum entangled in my Pegasus experiences. Then I'll begin essentially the second narrative thread of my experiences that I think are publicly significant, which is that in the summer of 1980, I attended a training course to go to Mars that was held at the College of the Siskiyous in Weed, California. It was taught by Major Ed Dames, who would go on to substantial notoriety as somebody discussing our remote viewing capability, the kill shot from the sun, and many scary themes like that on the old Art Bell show and on Coast, and has written a number of books in that area. But I'm asking Ed Dames to come forward with what else he knows, which is that he was one of the project personnel on Project Pegasus. I worked with him in the early 70s in the Montauk Chair in New Mexico. And Ed also, I encountered him later in my Project Mars experiences that began in summer of 80, there at the College of the Siskiyous. We have identified 4 of the 10 teenagers who were enrolled in that course, which was a 3-week seminar to go to Mars. In addition to myself, William Brett Stillings was in attendance, and Brett and I have just spent 2 weeks in Southern California and Northern California going over our Mars experiences. We've spent about a year. He contacted me in February of 2010 after hearing me on Coast in November of 2009 and said, listen, I've got to talk to you. And I said, why? He said, because I know you, man. I worked with you. I remember you and your father. And he began telling me about meeting me at the Lake Siskiyou campground near Mount Shasta in 1980. Well, in the intervening 14, 15 months, we have established what happened to us when we were trained under Ed Dames at College of the Siskiyous and when we went to Mars. And it's during this symposium in this beautiful state of Hawaii, among all of you and all the good feelings and the good vibration that I feel here, I'm going to be revealing my Mars experiences that go beyond my first two trips up there, to include my training. Because among us in that training group were several persons of interest. One of them was Regina Dugan, who now is the director of DARPA. And I'm also revealing publicly here for the first time in his native state of Hawaii, in his native country of America, not the putative alternative birthplace of Barack Obama, of Kenya, that one of the 10 children who was in class with us was a young man from Hawaii who we liked very much and admired very much, in the same way that we liked and admired Regina Dugan, who was then at Caltech, enrolled with me as when I was a UCLA student and attending this summer seminar, was a young man from Hawaii named Barry Soetoro, who several years later would adopt the name Barack Obama and today serves as the 44th President of the United States. Now, I'm not going to dwell on that because there was a discussion held between my father, Raymond Bashago, and Tom Stillings, the father of my colleague Brett Stillings. And by the way, Brett and I are going to be coming forward publicly in August in an interview in Los Angeles that is going to be conducted by the great Mexican journalist, really the Mike Wallace of the Mexico 60 Minutes, which is the distinguished journalist Jaime Maussan. We've decided to share this information with Jaime because of the yeoman work that he's done over many years in the way that Alfred and Laura are standing by the truth of the situation, that we're not only being visited by extraterrestrials, but our government has been in liaison with one or more extraterrestrial species. So with that Jaime Maussan interview, we're going to be talking about being trained to go up to Mars. We're going to describe what we did. We're going to describe why we were doing what we were doing. And we're going to end the Obama cover-up. So, but I don't want to dwell on this because as a Washington Democrat, I not only support President Obama, I voted for him. We certainly were fond of each other when we worked together in summer of '80. But I think I want to help him a little bit and clarify the fact that the reason his administration propagated the birther controversy, let me say that again, the reason that his administration propagated the birther controversy is because Barack Hussein Obama's past is very similar to my own. My father was affiliated with the Central Intelligence Agency because he had worked on classified aerospace projects to protect our planet, presumably from a possible threat, going back, as I said, to October of 1952. Stanley Ann Dunham Obama, Barack Obama's mother, was affiliated with the CIA. In fact, her family was. Alfred's done a number of articles about this. Her parents were affiliated with the CIA, and she was. And so in the same way, Barack Obama was one of the whiz kids who was brought into the secret functionings of government. And to my astonishment, I was talking about my Project Pegasus experiences, my Project Mars experiences, but it wasn't until Brett Stillings came forward and began to jog my memory about what happened in summer of '80 that I realized I had stepped back into a constitutional controversy, which is not whether time travel will be declassified and not whether Mars is inhabited, but the fact that Barry Soetoro from Hawaii was in our class. I know that because coming out of class one day, I asked him his name, so it's a positive ID. So kind of as a sidebar to my Project Mars experiences, you'll have the first clarification that anybody in the public has gotten about the fact that President Obama has a past with the U.S. government that goes back to when he and I were age 18, and we were trained to go to Mars by Major Ed Dames at the College of the Siskiyous in Wee, California. Now I'm emphasizing those obscure facts because I'm going to count on all of you to watch my back between now and the Jaime Maussan interview, so I stay in body and continue to do my work in truth.
Now, in this dimension, in this incarnation, Ed and I encountered each other in 1999 or the year 2000, I think.
Yeah, we were introduced by a mind control, self-described targeted Kathy Caston, who had worked at UCLA, which was my alma mater as an undergrad. And she wanted to connect us because she realized we were attorneys who were seriously looking at claims of targeted individuals in the area of covert government mind control. So she threw us together as fellow attorneys, Alfred being a member of the Washington, D.C. bar, the District of Columbia, myself, Washington State. So we met as fellow crusading lawyers through the good graces of a targeted individual.
Right, and then Andy began to debrief me in the same way that he has debriefed you today, and will be debriefing you over the course of the week on his experiences and some of these secret projects in the teleportation and time travel area, and all of their exopolitical and political dimensions over the course of that decade between 2000 and 2010. And I think by the time you and I had met, I had already written the draft of Exopolitics, which would go on to become the book that Andy had seen physically in 1971 that would not be published until 2005. So that gives you some of the...
Alfred's book, Alfred's clearly not just a political person of interest, but I think he's a cosmic person of interest, and I'm sure you'll conclude that by Thursday, because in fact, he is the author of the first book to be written with both its writer and editor having conscious awareness of its pre-existence. So, in other words, Exopolitics is the first work of literature in human history that was written and edited, at least rewritten from the 1999 draft in 2005, which is the Exopolitics 2005, the Universe Books editions, the first work in human history to have been written with a conscious awareness by both its writer and editor, that's myself, that it had been time traveled and had been in the presence of the editor as a child. So I think that probably means something.
And I must say that when I found this out, that the U.S. government had my work in its possession for 30 years, especially the Nixon Republican team, myself being from, some of my background, as my mother, who was a fellow Gemini, said, I'm polyphacetic. And as a Wall Street lawyer, I was simultaneously one of the counsel at the Panther 21 trial, if you can understand how that's done. The Panther 21 trial was a trial in New York at which 21 Black Panthers were tried on a set-up charge of conspiring to blow up the Statue of Liberty. Well, I was a cooperating attorney with the U.S. Civil Liberties Union, and I was so enraged by what I thought was a COINTELPRO setup that I was one of the counsel in that trial. But my day job was with a very large, in fact, the largest international law firm, which is sort of on the other side of the fence. So I've always been kind of in that position, if you understand my meaning. So during the first 5 years of the 2010 decade, for me, this was a learning curve. Andy and I had frequent updates and conversations, and also sort of puzzling things out. And I was sort of one of a circle of informal advisors in terms of bringing out this information and helping to vouchsafe it and make it public. And I can remember when I came out here to the 2005 Dolphin and Extraterrestrial Conference. I think I stayed the first couple of days out at the ranch, and then I came here to the hotel, and I checked into the hotel, and Andy called me from Washington, called me from the States and said, Alfred, I think I may be assassinated. Because I think you were in a townhouse. Remember that one?
Yeah. Yeah.
You were at my house when you got that message?
I had just checked into the hotel
Oh, right.
when Andy called me with that message.
I didn't even know Andy.
Yeah. This is to give you a flavor of our interaction over the past 10 years.
I was threatened by the Bush administration during my first fact-finding trip to New Mexico. I met with a number of informants there that had been set up through an historian who was then teaching at a college in Texas. It turns out that most historians teaching in Texas are analysts for the CIA. So this person readily got me access to the Office of Naval Intelligence. I had actually been under the Office of Naval Intelligence. In fact, before I went up to Mars, which I went up initially in summer of '81, and I was going up there regularly via jump room between fall of '81 and summer of '83, I actually was required to go down to the Long Beach, California Naval Station and take a set of portraits in the dress white uniform of a lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy, because that is the basic rank that the intelligence officers hold. Curiously, after I submitted my life story to ABC Disney, that picture has been dropped into a Pixar animated classic called Wall-E. Has anybody here seen Wall-E? 44 minutes and 14 seconds into Wall-E, you can see a picture of me at 20 as it was taken in Long Beach in 1981 in the rather immaculate dress whites of Lieutenant Commander in the U.S. Navy. So I've been shadow listed as an LCDR from that age because they needed to attach me to some branch of the military if there was ever any kind of criminal or any kind of public revelation of the fact that I was doing stuff for the government. But quite frankly, although I never forgot my Pegasus experiences from childhood, from the 69-72 period, in fact, there's many instances where I was talking about them, I admittedly was very amnestic about my Mars experiences, and I'm still actively investigating them. So during that first fact-finding trip in New Mexico, the fourth meeting was with Bill Richardson. The fifth meeting was with a liberal journalist. I won't say who it was, but he's not that renowned, but I know who he was. In the parking lot of the Wolf Creek Pass Ski Lodge in southwest Colorado. And he said, look, I don't have much time. I represent the executive office of the president, and we simply want you to know the following. And I said, what? And he said, well, the time travel technologies that you're remembering exist. They exist to this day as sensitive and compartmentalized national security secrets. The national security of the United States depends on them. You were in the project that you remember being in. You're not delusional, so you don't have to worry about having yourself screened psychiatrically by the Washington State Bar Association. And but we need you to know that if you continue to investigate, write about, or talk about these experiences, and this sounds very Rumsfeldian. I hope you appreciate that. Probably came from Secretary Rumsfeld. He said, but if you don't stop talking about this, we can't guarantee your survival. Now that kind of reminds me of like a line from Dr. Strangelove. You're being threatened, but you're not being told we're going to kill you if you don't shut up. You're being told, if you don't shut up, we can't guarantee your survival. So I've known since then that at least that right-leaning, government-abusing, corporate-aligned faction probably isn't that pleased about the fact that I'm coming forward and discussing not only the existence of time travel, but the fact that every American president since Jimmy Carter has been given prior notification of their presidency. In fact, my father and I had lunch in Albuquerque in 1971, around the time that I first heard the distinguished name Alfred Lambermont Weber. And at that lunch were George Herbert Walker Bush, his wife Barbara Bush, and George W. Bush, the 41st and 43rd future presidents of the United States. And young W, who was then about 24, 25 years old, was going to every table where the project people were having lunch, joking, saying, have you heard? My daddy and I are going to be president. So again, I have no umbrage, although I am a Washington Democrat, because at that time we also met a young hayseed from Hope, Arkansas named Bill Clinton, who was very youthful looking, and who was saying things like, well, you guys, I know you're in the atomic research community and everything, but sometimes I just get up and pinch myself and say, me, Bill Clinton, I'm going to be president someday? I'm not buying it, guys. What was happening was they were approaching the future presidents and literally bringing them through the social network of the project itself. They were literally having these quiet lunches in Albuquerque with people like my father, with some of the other engineers at the Ralph M. Parsons Company, like Raymond Kubik and Joe Conason, who were some of my dad's colleagues, like Dr. Ivan Browning at CIA, like Dr. Agnew. They literally put them among the techies who were developing time travel rather than filter it elsewhere through the CIA. I think maybe because they thought future presidents would believe them if they were talking to people who either were Manhattan Project scientists or who were regularly working with them. So I think I may have gotten a little off track here, but...
No, I wanted to make that point because when Andy called me in kind of extremis at that point and asking for advice and assistance because he felt that his life was threatened, I had just come from the ranch and I was here for the Dolphins and Extraterrestrial Conference, and I knew in my heart that if I was here with Joan with the Dolphins, then all was good. So I reassured Andy. And here we are, right? So all was good. So the point being that we're really held together by strings of love and strings of assurance, and that the Dolphins had an unseen role in protecting the secrets and the revelation of the secrets of Project Pegasus. So let's have a round of applause for the Dolphins. Interesting, right? I'm glad that I got to tell that particular anecdote.
Now, how did you meet Laura?
Yeah, well, Laura, there's this magical thing called Facebook. And I actually written an article about it, and I guess you all know about Facebook, that it's basically an outgrowth of DARPA. Project Pegasus and Facebook are both outgrowths of DARPA. And Facebook is an outgrowth of DARPA's Total Information Awareness Project. And it is essentially the implementation of total information awareness. And it's all of us get to tell the government what we all do all the time. That's what Facebook is. And that's how a young Harvard dropout got billions of dollars. But if you trace the billions of dollars, it's all from Alphabet agencies and CIA front companies that gave it to them. So that is what we called, when I was back in my SRI days, friendly fascism. So there's a double-edged sword, because in this world that we live in, I love it, I kind of call it the Italian painting style of chiaroscuro, which is light amidst the darkness. And that's kind of sort of a philosophy of life, and that is all the light beings are meeting on Facebook and coming together in this way. Well, there was a person called Kalia Light, and she came and met me, and we were interacting for a while, and she was a good friend of Laura's, and so I sent Laura a copy of my book. She was living in the East Coast at the time, and then that occurred, and then it sort of blossomed into, I asked Laura to participate with Kalia in an interview on Exopolitics Radio around the various principles that she represents, and also around her experiences in being recruited for the secret Mars colony. And so then out of that, that happened, and then out of that evolved a kind of a three-way ongoing conversation between the three of us, and then out of that evolved a radio program that was Marsgate and Alternative 4. And Andy coined the term Marsgate, which is like Watergate, and Laura the term Alternative 4, which last night Joan got the movie Alternative 3, which was only seen once in the UK. It's only shown publicly once and then taken off the air, and it was sort of a mockumentary about the secret Mars base back in the 1970s. Yeah, so we actually saw that last night. Yeah, so that was sort of watching an historical movie. I feel a little embarrassed because I kind of dozed off at one point. I was really tired. I went swimming and everything.
It was a good movie.
Yeah, no, but I actually saw most of it.
Oh, okay.
And we said, well, gee, you know, the movie Alternative 4 would be really interesting to make. And that,
You'll have to explain all that about what Alternative 1, 2, and 3 were.
yeah, Laura will do that. And so Joan then saw the alternative, Marsgate and Alternative 4, listened to the Marsgate and Alternative 4 radio program and article that we did, and that was the seed that gave rise to the event that we're all sharing now. So that's how the upward spiral of life brought us here, I think.
I got choked up in the middle of the interview, or maybe more towards the beginning, because I realized in real time that I was now aligned with two of the individuals that have been identified as persons of interest back when I was on the project relative to the truth movement. And I think I congratulate both Alfred and Laura for hitting their marks, because here they are. In other words, you know, one of the positive things that was predicted, which was the emergence of a truth movement that would be as historically powerful and significant as, let's say, the abolition movement, was on track, because part of our story of all three of us is that we can recount different ways, different efforts that were made to impede our destiny, including social disruption efforts and even remote targeting. So I realized I got very choked up during that interview, because all three of us had basically defeated the Pentagon and were actively working to bring about the truth about time travel, about extraterrestrial visitation to Earth, and about the fact that Mars is the planet that is closest to us is not only an inhabited planet with its own indigenous ecology and civilization worthy of our protection and respect, but that indeed there has been an historical cover about the U.S. presence on Mars, and hence our own initial journeys out into our own solar system. So I got very emotional, because I realized that the champion on my left and the champion on my right had struggled through the resistance that the three of us were given, and arrived at that moment where we were now literally collaborating.
So, with that, I pass the baton.
Oh, hello, everybody. So a lot obviously has been covered, and I'm like, wow. And it's interesting because so many different concepts that were brought up relate to my story as well. And I realized that my whole life up to this point was just about getting here and surviving it. And whatever I kind of went through to do that was so strong in me that my whole story before meeting both of them is just moving through all that, kind of like everything coming at you, and you're just moving through it at all costs, no matter what, and just holding as tightly as one possibly can, even though everything's trying to convince you to be this way or that way, and there's family pressure, and this or that, or there's projections and isolation and exile. You just refuse to give it up, and you refuse to be anybody but yourself. So that was sort of the story of my life. So by the time I met them, I was pretty much, had been through the ringer, really just, I was amazed that people as intellectual as them wanted to give me the time of day, because I was convinced at that point in my life that I was not only crazy, even though I knew that I wasn't, but I figured that was the reaction that I was constantly getting, so I was just kind of like, well, yeah, we'll see where this goes. I mean, after a little while, you might just be like, And then I realized they have such a parallel story. And in a way, there has been this holding on to truth and putting up with the craziness of disinfo, of this false matrix that has been in the works since Sumerian times, really, and really the core of our story as a humanity. So my time travel experience has really been going back to the Big Bang and starting there. Might as well start at the Big Bang. And I just spent my life, starting as a kid, kind of tracing the steps back and kind of wondering how I ended up in this family. For a while, just thinking that there must be some mistake. Because at the first portion of it, it wasn't about Eisenhower and freedom and peace and justice and feeling this incredible connection with him. It was about feeling very awkward in my family and very much like the black sheep, until it really dawned on me what this man was all about. And then I really started to feel like I'm absolutely in the right family. It's just there's a lot in my family that has sort of gotten a little bit past that, or stayed on the surface with the war and the victory of the war and his presidency, and not dug deep into the extraterrestrial thing or anything that has to do with the real deep layers of what's going on in the shadow government. And also how that ties into our planetary body, Gaia, the myths of the divine feminine, and basically the negative technologies that are attacking the planet and the feminine force within male and female. So I was sort of, just as a kid having all this stuff swirl around me, and I attempted to communicate to it. I would go to family gatherings and, attempt to share my insights about it, because I kept saying, I was trying to figure out who this bald guy was that kept visiting me as a child, and I realized that he's a relative of mine, and I have some questions here, because there's something a lot more than just war and presidency. There's a lot more that I'm being communicated to. And there is also, higher races that seem to be preparing me for something, and the preparation was all about, you're basically going to lose your life, and you have to hold on to this for dear life. And so between the ages of maybe 7 and 10 or 11, I was being prepared by him and some very high beings that were just literally saying, just don't lose sight of this. I looked through some sort of viewfinder this one race gave me, and they showed me the positive timeline. And they said, this future is going to be so beautiful that, it'll make you cry. And so let's all cry. And just to, hold on to it, and that is what is real, and basically nothing else is real. And so, and all these weird things were happening as a child, and I was in my shared room with my sister, and she just didn't know what to think. She's just like, Laura is just so out there. And everybody agreed that Laura, and I remind people, I was voted most out of touch with reality for the senior class, and it just dawned on me that I am really out there. Okay, I get it. But during this out there-ness, I really was escaping a lot of attack, and I was using multi-dimensions to hide and to really keep myself alive. And while I was, going into other dimensions to sort of escape some of the frequencies and the controls that were on me, I realized that I was on a much more profound journey that had to do with retrieving aspects historically throughout just all these different ages and eras of getting my energy back from all these gatekeepers of all this control and suppression and exile of the feminine energies, and basically the agenda of mind control and the false matrix is to basically cut us off from nature, cut us off from Gaia, cut us off from the natural stargates, and really get out of our heart, the Venus energy, and get into, mind manipulation without knowing it, serving an agenda that would lead us to be completely and totally enslaved, and basically not in control of our free will or our spiritual journey, which is all about having full-on activated DNA and being able to multi-dimensionally travel and have the abilities that all these lower technologies are mimicking. If used incorrectly, of course. When they're not used incorrectly, they can absolutely revolutionize and change our planet, which is, what we're here to discuss. So as I was getting to a certain point in my life before I had Facebook, I think I knew 2 people, and I'm just losing it every day, and I still at times, just to battle the frequencies, I battle it back, I'm just kind of always in war with energy. I get to a point where 2006 was a very critical time. So before I go into how I met these folks, I better bring up the Mars thing. So before I met them, of course, what really brought me to do this article with Alfred, I had been recruited to go to Mars. And I was also identified in that program through Looking Glass Technologies, the technology that they had named. And I just was kind of, strutting along in my really out there, out of touch reality life, and going to a festival and just, trying to cope. I couldn't really go to school. This is why I was amazed that such intellectual people wanted to give me the time of day, because I had to separate from everything. I had to separate from humanity. I had to separate from just even, the good part of it, and my parents and my family, because they couldn't understand what I was going through, and I couldn't live a normal life. I could not fit into this particular dimension, and I just wasn't in my body for about 20 years, and that's that whole journey I went on. So around 2006, I'd gone to a festival, and I met somebody who, I made friends with, and I'm like, he doesn't think I'm out there. He understands me. Not that this was like a complex. Now I've made it a complex, but but at this point, I was with other people that might be considered out there. And anyway, so he shows up, and it's a compliment actually. He shows up and we, hang out, and we have an incredible affinity, and it's a natural affinity, and just on a very organic level. And so I'm going to be getting into this, of course, as I do my talk, so I'm not going to talk about it now, but to make a long story short, we ended up forming a partnership, even though, there's something weird going on. He was going to secret meetings and finding out more and more about this mission that he was, put in charge of putting together. So he felt really like he was doing really good work for humanity, and this was a great thing that he was doing, which was to, follow orders and get this mission going. Well, at first I thought it was an invitation, and that we had just met, and it was just, like Bali, Peru, Mars, So I'm like, yeah, that's really sweet. I'd love to go there maybe someday with you, but I have a strong mission on Earth that I was born with, and I got to make sure I do that first, then maybe. And I was just. This is where I agree that I am out there, because I was naive. I didn't really know the layers and the layers of the shadow government. I understood the ET thing. I understood some of the communications I was getting from Ike and the deeper things going on a government level, but this was a little bit different, and this really connected to archetypal things and things that Andy was a part of, and Alfred was a part of, that has to do with moving people off planet and using these technologies to figure out a way to keep the human genome alive. But at the same time, the communications aren't necessarily what the planetary body and the cosmos have in mind as far as what the natural order is ready to manifest, as far as what we are divinely co-creating on our spiritual paths. This was very much a part of something different. And as I was cluing in more and more, I started to lose that little romance in him. And like, oh wow, this is really something far different. And I did my research, and I got really in touch with what I was dealing with, and discovered that the partner that was at times a very strong affinity with me on an organic level was slowly becoming very robotic and very different. And I could tell that there was many personalities going on, because at times he would get phone calls and hear something and drop everything, climb out the window and disappear for days. And I was like, wow, that's different. So yeah, and I have kids, and I'm a single mom, and I have a hard time just dealing with trying to get family to understand what I'm really going through, because this is all very hidden stuff. And so a lot of what was happening before I met them was digging my way out and really surviving. I mean, really, since I was young, it's really been about survival, which is a lot of the preparation that I was getting, which was to hold on to this truth for dear life, and that it would be ripped away from me, and to never lose sight of it. And I could have easily, but not really, because this was a very strong mission I was born with. But I, could have ended up in a lot more traps than I did, even though I ended up in so many I can't even keep track. I mean, it's just, the stories are endless, and just trying to stay alive to the point where I don't take it personally. I'm not a victim. It's just, I just say it's another day at the office. Even if I survive some sort of attack that almost kills me, it's just another day at the office. So anyway, after I got over a certain hump and I got myself safe and really disengaged from the Mars thing after finding out that we didn't meet, and I wasn't just invited because this was a nice thing that was offered as you know, a relationship opportunity. He was sent to find me, and it was one of the missions that he was given, maybe by the phone, maybe some code, I don't know, which was to locate me at this festival. So obviously I have some kind of tracking device that I still have to deal with and maybe get rid of. So that was 9 months into the relationship, and it was kind of like my jaw just dropped. I'm like, wait, excuse me, you were sent to find me? I could understand the whole, you're wrapped up in this and you meet me and you want to take me as your partner. It's another thing to know that you were actually sent specifically to find me. And then I got more and more information out of him because I was having prophetic dreams about what this meant and about choices that I had and voices coming out of the sky saying, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I didn't even have all my information then. So it all came down to beginning to reveal that and having him start to leak all kinds of information to me after dismantling all the technology in the house so he could communicate to it. And then all of a sudden being triggered again and then not being him anymore. So it was a very difficult time. But I got through it, obviously. I'm here. And so when I was in that interview with the two of them, and we started talking about it and realizing that we all had made it, and he was getting, you know, really into the explanation of what he knew on his end, I was stunned because not only did I feel like all that I knew since I was young was right on and that I was on the right track, it was lining up with something that was going to take it to the next level. And that sort of intuitive feeling, that voice that whispers in your ear, keep going, you're going to make it, and you're almost done, was actually real because there was a stopping point where that isolation, exile, and just attack and manipulation did cease. And that was around the time when Alfred had said, you know, let's do a story on this. And I was like, wow, yeah, no, I really do have to tell this story. And that's when, you know, I got a lot more acquainted with their stuff, and the pieces just really started to come together. And at this point, ever since, the level of protection, the level of sanity, just on a, okay, I can really just get in and be okay now, has increased, you know, to huge degrees. But at the same time, you know, there is a lot of awareness of this and a lot of backlash, but there's something to be said for having company. That if you're not in it alone anymore, it hardly phases you as much as the times where it was just you and you made no sense to anybody at all. So yeah, I mean, basically what I'm going to be covering is, I'm going to start at the Big Bang in some ways, the galactic core, the pleroma, the myths of Sophia, and stuff regarding sacred union, which was their major target for me. They said, you can't be mind controlled, you somehow just can't seem to mind control you. So their thing was to heart control me, to have men that they would set up as their agents to break this whole sort of thing I had about sacred union being the most important thing on the planet. And I wrote about it for years and they were aware of it. So what better way to manipulate me than to take the most important thing to me, and right at the moment that I'm like, here's the sacred union relationship, kabam, you know, all of a sudden it's not going to happen. So that was their little tactic for me. That was my weak point as far as they were concerned. So I'm going to be talking about the significance of that as far as the planetary body goes in the cosmos, and just who we really are, divine blueprint, and just the roots of everything that's what it is now and how it snowballed, you know, with the Anunnaki and the battle between Enki and Enlil, and really getting into esoteric mythological stuff, and just how the mind control behavior modification agendas, you know, first started, the roots of the Illuminati and where they are today, and just sort of the progression through it throughout history and time. And, you know, just really into the multidimensional nature of things, into the concept alternative 4, and into just sort of what myths ended up becoming real and a part of our soul experience, all of us, as a result of the exile of the feminine energies, which were the one thing that they picked out to implement the mind control false matrix agenda that are basically turning our world into much more of a cyborg, repto-draconian, infiltrated power structure, enslaved, you know, all those terms. So it's basically the story of that, and how Alternative 4 is really us taking charge and saying, you know, we can experience this history, we can all just get this information, but we are co-creators, and we are dreamers, and our imagination is dictating where we go from here. So why just sit and settle for what we hear? Let's do something about it, and let's take it to the next level. So Alternative 4 is really about the power of the human spirit and how us coming together and pulling our power away from these structures that do not care about us, giving it back to ourselves and really working with the planetary forces, understanding that the natural order is for us to ascend. It's not something that's far reachable because it's who we really are. It's more about returning and remembering and really waking up and reactivating what's been taken away, because it's really our belief systems that they took, not our DNA. But our DNA has been infected. And the reason it's been infected is because the minute our belief systems choose to not serve our own physical organism and our own spiritual path, then everything starts to break down and we start to give our power away. So it's really about the renewal and the regeneration of all of this, which connects to how the planetary body works with the underworld, with the heavens, and how that's an organism, and how it has the same laws and principles that we do. And when we all do this together, we not only restore Gaia, we restore ourselves, and we lift these veils. And all of those other energies cannot thrive. And they only have been thriving because we have simply forgotten and given, our power away, but under such heavy manipulation that it's not anything that any of us should be ashamed of if we are just all of a sudden waking up, because these are so sophisticated. The archons, these ET races, these lower races, have been in the works before the planetary body was created. And they've been messing with our genetics and really mixed our genetics with what are called the ancient ones, which are really the original aeons that come out of the pleroma that connect to and honor the feminine and honor nature and honor Gaia. And that's why people have such duality. They want to do good, but then they feel, it's almost like, the masculine especially, they might have this seed of misogyny. They might not know why, but then they also love the feminine. I mean, that's part of the major deal is, and then, women, they have sort of this battle against themselves, but then they just want to, love and all this stuff. So we have a duality program in us that we can start to mend by simply understanding at a root level what the game has been and why. And so I'll just be digging really, really deep and walking us through the whole creative process till now, and then, working to really empower the natural stargate, the Venus transits, and how the feminine energies and the goddess energy has been in the works behind the scenes since day one, never quitting to assist in this process. And while it's doing it, actually is reversing all the inversions, all the symbols that they've used and inverted, and all the different things that connect to the Kundalini, connect to the chakra system. So without giving it all away, we're just going to get really in it, and we're going to find that we're all kind of feeling the unity consciousness, the co-creation together, and we're going to shift things right here this week. So it's not just about getting information, it's about actually doing it and clearing the way so that when we walk out of here, we know that we never have to look back and think that we have this villain breathing down our necks and that we're just absolutely totally liberated. And I've just been foreseeing this since I was a child. And when I knew that I was invited to this conference, I just said, this is the place that it's going to happen. So I'm unbelievably grateful to be here. And I'm just blown away that everything has fallen into place. And it's just such a great feeling because it validates inner truth and what we've all been holding on to this whole time, because we're really in this together. The Venus energy is the unified field. It's not one person, it's all of us. And it's what we've been really longing for. And that's why we've all shown up. And, it's gonna spread to all those that care, that couldn't make it. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, because well, the question was mainly where I come from, of course, I spent 20 years in France, and then 20 years in South Pacific, and 20 years in Hawaii. But then it's not really who I am, because when I was born, I had all those visions. So somehow there was a prenatal information and intelligence that was in here, deep inside us. And I think it happened to every children. It's just that, huh? No, it's, thanks. And the information that was coming, or the visions, they were not, I couldn't put it into words. So I was thinking that, but not anyone was understanding it. So it's like I'm living in two worlds at the same time. So this world, which is, let's say, who we are within the history of what history made us, which is the last 3 3,000 years or 5,000 years, and maybe a future because there is a timeline there. But I'm here within that timeline, but there was another life. And thanks God I'm not crazy because I can paint it. And now I'm putting it into films. So it makes more sense to me. And I said, oh well, that's real. Because it's not only feelings, but there's also that things I can share with people now. So I'm pretty comfortable with that now by being here. But anyway, I'm here maybe because this planet is so beautiful, and we all experience things differently. You know, if you have a love affair and someone else has another love affair, it's a totally different story. You know, it's a totally different hologram, and we can put this into words, but the feelings are not something you can translate, the experience. So that's what the kind of experience that I have. I'm still trying to express them and give the feeling to people. That's why I switched from doing images, which I never really wanted to do images. When I was a kid, I was dreaming, just playing piano, and then instead of having notes coming out, those visions, those worlds, like Aurora is creating worlds, a holographic world, which now I can do with three-dimensional computer. I can create different worlds, I mean, like different mountain seas and pyramids, and you travel in within. Where I'm going in there, I really don't know, but it's really pleasant, and that's part of who I am. And also who I am is when I bite a fruit, it's so delicious, you know, being on this planet is so fantastic. So most of the time we just look at the news and it's so terrible, and we have to pay tax and we have to do that and that and that. So we forget about the beauty of this planet, and there's so much more than just what we can touch or taste or see. And that's what I would like to share with people. So I'm still in that place where I'm trying to find the bridge coming from this body, which experienced, the school and all the system and the limitation that we have in the body and in the mental. And I think also there was some brainwashing in us that we're living only very superficial life, belief system mainly. And that when it appeared to me watching the kids around me when I was a kid, although it's more than 60 years ago, I still live in that world of those visions that I can express now much clearly. And those kids, by age 4, they're already brainwashed by the system, and whatever system it was, from religions to the school, and they forgot about dreaming. Even in France, a country which just celebrates art, all what they want to do, a few engineers or that kind of thing, but not artists. And that's very surprising. But it was very hard to do art in France. So, but I managed to do it by just escaping in the forest and seeing the beauty and getting my nourishment from nature. Because I find that as we'll be talking more about stargates, I can just watch a flower and that's a stargate for me. Because there is a resonance between my heart and my love for nature. It's kind of unique things, like I said, you have a love affair that you can express it, you just experience it. But I have this connection, and that's open another dimension. So there's something fascinating now. It's the revelation that we are witnessing now, that we're so much more than who we think we are. So I'm very glad to be part of this, and I'm mainly here to support John, because we met because we recognized each other vision and intention of bringing to people the realization that there is so much more level of reality and level of existence, and we don't have to be trapped in what we see in a newspaper or from the school. and that the children also in the future will hopefully, and I think they will go that way, will experience so much more their potentials by living their intuition. That's what the feminine is coming back now, because the feminine is much more intuitive, and by this intuition was so much flexible, and we find new routes that instead of running through the walls, to be creative. So I let my feminine aspect to create, and it's just a fantastic world. So I'll be showing different, it leads me also to another project I'm doing after the second film that you've seen first here. It's another story, and I don't know really how to approach it. Connection with dragon, but I'm not going to go there now. But anyway, because that's another experience, and they're real, and they're not what we think they are, like ugly, fearful beasts, but they're very beautiful. But it's a bit frightening. I got to, pass that fear wall, and then I tell you, discover something wonderful. I will have I haven't had the time, because I had to fly to France a few times to take care of my mom, but so I didn't finish the film, but I put it into a PowerPoint, so with a few slides of that. So sometime we'll do that. Okay, so I really like you guys. It's fascinating. I want to hear more.
Yeah, I mean, all of you who know John Luke know he's just so sensitive and so gentle, nature always, and what he's feeling is always like right on his sleeve. You can always tell what's going on with him, so I'm going to tell this as a reference. So, he never wants his name on anything. He never wants to get it out. He doesn't even put it on his art. Luckily his art is so unique, people recognize it as his anyway, but so I'm doing the flyers for this symposium and all, and I'm writing them up, and it's, the website is my name, joanocean.com, and John Luke's name isn't on there, so I said, we're really doing this together. I mean, I totally depend on his support. I can talk to him. He's always there. He does all the legwork. It's unbelievable. So I said, I'm going to put you down as the host of it. And, I don't know. So we were just talking about that as I was designing the flyer. The next morning he comes in, I'm working at my computer, and he's looking all haggard and exhausted, and what's wrong, and you can just, like I said, read him, and of course my background in psychology, and he said, I had this dream last night, and I love his dreams, because his dreams tell all of what's going on with him, so he says in his dream there was the CIA had one of these rifles with a viewfinder on it, and it was on me. But then they slowly moved it over and put it on him instead. Because I was going to make him be the host. I said, yeah, that's another role you have to play. You got to take the bullet now. So I mean, it was just silly, but for me, what happened here, I've always been interested in going further, stepping out, learning more, trying to understand who I am, and then wanting to be able to share it with other people. It's so strong in me. And then when I heard Andy talk, I still get choked up, because the truth that came from him, every word he said rang so strongly with me. My heart was so touched. And it was like what I'd been waiting for decades, to hear someone who had been there, done that, could speak about it, didn't have their mind scrambled, were really able to express it and do it in such a loving way. And one of the things that really impresses me, about what you do, you don't get into the them and us. You know, the bad guys and the good guys, the duality and all. You consider yourself like one. You were part of this project and part of this, the military project, and it's we doing this, you know? And it's a great achievement of the American scientists that this has been accomplished. And so as I listened, he never reverted over to blaming or pointing a finger, saying this is bad. He just came from that place of helping humanity. And I was so moved by that. And I think all three, you know, Alfred, Andy, and Laura, all act as triggers. You know, probably things they've said have been triggering things in you. And that's what happened to me. I mean, I know Andy was raised in New Jersey, and so was I. Well, there must be a million people who can say that same thing. But then so many things he said, like when he was at Curtis Wright, it was only 10 minutes from me. I used to have to deal with the traffic of that place right near where I live. And then when I went to driving to California, I wanted to stop at Sandia Labs. Why did I want to stop at Sandia Labs when I was in my 20s? I don't know. I had to drive all the way up the mountain, see it. There was nothing there, really, and come back down again. There were all kinds of trigger things. I lived on Lenape Lane on the reservation, and then Andy mentioned that was one of the places where they would be, what time traveling from there, or returning people there?
Well, they selected the area of New Jersey that had been settled by the Lenape Indians, you know, thousands of years ago, and the oldest settled part in the western United States, which was, you know, Santa Fe was the regional capital of the province of New Mexico and in the state of New Mexico territory for 400 years. So the Lenape lands that I was growing up in there, that had evolved into suburban New Jersey, were actually intentionally selected as, those were selected as the nodes in the teleportation because there was always a concern that we would be lost in time. And as a child of the 1960s, seeing, you know, Lost in Space on television, that was a very disconcerting notion. And they said, well, you know, we've selected these two areas of the country because if you get there and it's not 1971, it's 1791, there'll be people there, and we just urge you to find the most responsible adults, tell them that your parents have died in an accident, and ask to be adopted into their household. So they intentionally selected, you know, these long settled areas of the country in New Jersey and New Mexico to set up the teleportation system experimentally.
So again, these are just, you know, little trigger things for me, but like I lived at 27 Lenape Lane in Oakland, New Jersey for many years, you know. So there were a lot of things in the talk you shared. I haven't even had a chance to tell you about the couriers and the experience I've had, that same thing too, with being someone who was bringing information. It was kind of a small kind of mind control. But it didn't work too well because I remembered it all the time, and I'd call the engineers up on the phone and say, remember when I was talking to you earlier? And I don't think I was supposed to remember some of those things that I was guided to do. But the point is just that these things, however, they may be small little things, but they're awakening us, reminding us of who we are and what's important, and really able to hear the truth of what's being spoken. So that means so much to me, and Laura, I just laugh all the time. Everything you say is so profound, so amazing, every word, and then your sense of humor comes in, and it's just really wonderful to have that combination. And of course, Alfred, we've been friends. I read his book, is what started it. When I was doing my other conference in 2005, the Dolphins and E.T. Civilizations, I pretty much had the roster of all the people who were coming. And somehow I got Alfred's book, and I started reading it, and I've got to have him here. You know, he's so profound, such a futurist, always sees things from the universal point of view. He's not just, you know, here, our little world here. He's totally seeing it from the big view, which is fascinating. I love that interview you did with Lilu. Where's Lilu? Is Lilu? There she is. There's Lilu over there. Some of you know Lilu is the incredible interviewer. She's done some great ones with Drumbelow also, and everyone. You've been with everyone, haven't you, Lilu? So anyway, really incredible talk.
I have to mention this because I have an astral connection to Drumbelow Melchizedek, and we've never met in the waking state. In 1999, I had a series of dreams that I was in Greeley, Colorado, having basically a discourse or debate with Drunvalo. And during those dreams, I moved my face in front of one of the attendees, a woman by the name of Antoinette Jones, and smiled at her. And I met her about a year ago, and she recalled these astral meetings and said, yeah, you moved your face all the way in front of me just so that we would recognize each other when we ultimately met. I've also received, this is even more improbable, but this can be verified. I also received a phone call from a woman in Atlanta, Georgia named Christy Gibbs, who said, Andy, I know I was at these meetings with you in Colorado, and I believe in 2007. And I said, well, my dreams were, those dreams occurred in 1999. I said, but why do you know you were there in those meetings on the astral level? And she said, because in 2007, I received a postcard or a letter from myself from Greeley, Colorado. And I said, well, that makes perfect sense, because you may recall at the end of the dream, you said to me, how am I going to remember these important meetings on the astral level? And I said, before you leave Greeley, send yourself a postcard. And so she received it in 2007, even though the meetings, Antoinette and I have corroborated the fact that the meetings occurred in the dream state in 1999. So that, I think, is an example of the veils kind of lifting. Drunvalo was the person in the dreams that I had never heard of him. Facebook didn't exist. I had never seen of his work in New Age or paranormal circles, but it was somebody named Drunvalo Melchizedek. We were having a debate in which he was basically saying that we had to raise human consciousness, and I was saying we had to raise human consciousness and then figure out what to be conscious about. About things like achieving operation, implementing time travel and transportation, teleportation and transportation. But now Christy can confirm that she has received the postcard written by herself, following my advisement in the astral level that she sent it.